It was a perfect autumn afternoon, the kind that felt like a last, tender goodbye before the cold swallowed everything. The sun hung low, scattering golden patches on the cracked pavement in front of Cedar Heights High School. But for Miss Elara Quinn, none of that beauty registered. All she could hear were the cruel, taunting voices, and her own heart hammering in her ears. Neil. It was a single word, spat with such venom that it struck her like a slap. Elara's gaze swept over the faces of the students gathered around. Some held up their phones to record the spectacle. Others watched with wide-eyed fascination, eager to see just how far this would go. She looked for a shred of decency among them, some sign that someone would step forward to stop it, but no one did. Standing at the front was Chase Whitlock, a 17-year-old with a permanent sneer and an ego so swollen it could barely fit in his designer jacket. He had been terrorizing the school for years, always careful to stay just on the safe side of expulsion. Chase was a master manipulator, always hiding behind the smokescreen of his wealthy father's influence. And right now, he was determined to break her. Miss Quinn, you heard me. Chase's voice was loud, dripping with smug amusement. Kneel down, right here in front of everyone. Maybe you'll finally learn your place. Elara's throat closed, her legs trembled with shame and fury. She had been teaching here for 6 years of pouring everything she had into her students. She'd thought she could reach them all, even the difficult ones. Especially the difficult ones. But here she was, cornered, humiliated, and alone. She thought of her late mother who had taught her never to surrender her dignity. She thought of the students who'd quietly thanked her for believing in them. But she also knew that sometimes a single moment of cruelty could undo years of trust. A voice in her head whispered, if you don't stand up to this, they'll own you forever. Her gaze dropped to Chase's expensive sneakers, planted inches from her toes. The mob of teenagers pressed in closer. The smell of stale soda and sweat churned her stomach. Chase leaned forward, smirking, and spoke in a low voice meant just for her. You're nothing, Miss Quinn. You've always been nothing. Then louder, Kneel. Elara's breath came shallow and ragged. Her knees buckled under the weight of the humiliation, her body betraying her before her mind could fight back. The cold pavement bit into her skin, and a collective gasp rustled through the crowd. She pressed her palms flat against the rough concrete to steady herself, trying to keep the tears from falling. A girl near the back. Leela, one of her brightest students, raised her phone higher to record. Elara's heart broke a little more. Even teachers are pathetic, Chase crowed, turning to bask in the approval of the onlookers. Remember this moment, everybody. This is what happens when you mess with me. That was the final straw. Somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited a white-hot flame of defiance. She wasn't going to let him win. Not now, not ever. Elara slowly lifted her head. The crowd fell silent as they watched her push herself upright, her knees still on the pavement but her spine as straight as a spear. Chase's triumphant grin began to falter. You think this proves you're powerful, she said, her voice low and steady. But all it proves is that you're a coward. A ripple of unease moved through the students. Chase's face twitched. What did you say? She climbed fully to her feet, her legs unsteady but her resolve stronger than ever. I said you're a coward. You need an audience to feel strong. You need to humiliate others to feel important. But deep down, you're just a scared little boy. A hush fell so absolute that the wind rustling the dry leaves sounded deafening. No one here respects you, she continued, her voice rising. They're just afraid of you, and fear isn't respect. It's emptiness, it's loneliness. Chase's eyes flickered, and for the briefest instant, Elara saw in a flash of something wounded, something uncertain, but then his expression hardened. You think you can talk to me like that? He hissed, stepping forward. You think you can? Elara had never hit anyone in her life. But in that moment, as Chase raised a hand like he might strike her, something primal surged through her. She had spent too many years watching people suffer under bullies, too many years believing that keeping the peace was worth swallowing her pride. Not anymore. Her fist connected with Chase's jaw so fast, even she barely registered it happening. A collective gasp rose around them as he staggered back, his phone clattering to the pavement. The world seemed to freeze in that instant. Elara felt the sting in her knuckles, the thundering of her heart, the raw relief of finally fighting back. Chase clutched his face, his eyes wide with disbelief and rage. You crazy. But before he could finish, she stepped forward, voice ringing clear. You will never threaten or humiliate me or any other teacher again. Chase looked around, expecting the crowd to jump to his defense. But instead, several of the students lowered their phones. Some of them backed away. The spell was broken. And just like that, he was nothing more than a teenage boy with too much money and not enough soul. Principal Harris came running out of the building, breathless and alarmed. He took in the scene, the teacher standing tall. The bully crumpled on the ground and for a moment, he looked like he might scold her, but then he saw the faces in the crowd. He saw the way some of the students were watching her with wide, awed eyes. He swallowed whatever reprimand he'd been about to deliver. "Miss Quinn," he said carefully, "are you all right?" She drew in a slow, steadying breath. "Yes, I am now." Later that evening, Elara sat alone in her classroom, replaying every moment in her mind. The adrenaline had faded, leaving her shaky and exhausted. There would be consequences. Of course, she knew that teachers weren't supposed to hit students, no matter the provocation, even when the student was a habitual tormentor. But deep down, she also knew she'd done the right thing. She rested her aching hand on the desk, tracing the faint bruise already forming across her knuckles. It was a small price to pay for reclaiming her dignity. She heard a tentative knock on the door. When she looked up, Lila was standing there, her eyes red from crying. "Miss Quinn," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I should have." Elara shook her head. "It's not your fault, but I just stood there. I didn't help you." "You were scared," Elara said softly. "I understand, but remember this. No one ever has the right to treat you that way. No one." Lila nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You were so brave." Elara managed a small smile. "Sometimes bravery is just deciding you've had enough." The following week was a whirlwind. News of what had happened spread like wildfire. Parents, teachers, and administrators weighed in, everyone with their own opinions. Some demanded her termination. Others called her a hero. In the end, Principal Harris arranged a hearing with the school board. Elara sat in a sterile conference room while Chase's father, blustering red-faced, demanded her resignation. Chase himself sat sullenly at his side, refusing to look up. When it was her turn to speak, Elara rose from her chair. She looked each board member in the eye. "I will accept whatever consequences you decide," she said evenly. "But I will not apologize for defending myself. And I will not apologize for standing up to a bully." A heavy silence followed. One by one, the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, the oldest among them, Mrs. Town, had taught for 40 years before retiring, cleared her throat. "Miss Quinn," she said, her voice low, "you've reminded us that sometimes policies are not enough. Sometimes someone has to draw a line." The board voted not to fire her. She was suspended for a week without pay, but she would keep her job. When she returned to school, something was different. The atmosphere felt lighter. As she walked down the hall, students stepped aside to let her pass, not out of fear, but out of a newfound respect. Some of them nodded. Some simply watched her with quiet gratitude. And Chase Whitlock, he no longer swaggered through the halls. He no longer had an audience. His power had come from the fear he inspired. Without it, he was just another teenager trying to figure out who he was. A week after her return, Elara found a note on her desk, written in careful, looping handwriting. "Thank you for showing us we don't have to be afraid. We needed someone brave enough to fight back. Now, we know we can be brave too." There was no signature, but it didn't matter. She knew in her heart that she had done more than reclaim her dignity. She'd shown a generation of young people that no one deserved to be crushed under someone else's cruelty. That afternoon, as she gathered her things to go home, she paused by the classroom window. Outside, the late autumn light painted everything gold again. She thought back to that moment on the pavement, the cold biting her skin, the shame strangling her. And she thought about standing up, about refusing to let anyone define her worth. For the first time in a long while, Elara felt truly free. She left the building with her head high, her heart steady, and her spirits unbroken. And if you'd asked her later whether she regretted any of it, she would have answered without hesitation, no, because sometimes it only takes one person standing up to a bully to break the cycle for good. And sometimes, the person who finds the courage to rise up isn't the one you expect, but the one who finally decides enough is enough.